if you wanted.
Test, 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 test.
All set, Peter.
Okay, great. All right, I'd like to open the February 18th Select Board agenda. We will be joined by the Finance Committee around 7. At 6:31, this is an in-person meeting at 138 Main Street, Wenham, on the first floor. As a convenience to the public, it is available electronically via the Zoom link below or via HWCam for viewing and participation. In the event of a technology failure, the meeting will continue in person. Please be advised this meeting is being broadcast live via Zoom. It is also recorded for playback, video on demand viewing at hwcam.org. Please note that other than call to order, all times are estimated. Items may be taken out of order. So, public input. Purpose for the public comment on matters falling within the jurisdiction of the Select Board and not on the current agenda. Note public comment on specific agenda items with a public comment period will be deferred until those items are reached. Rules, 2 minutes per person. A person may speak once, 10 minutes total.
Move her over to a panelist. Karen.
Peter, I think you should do roll since
Roll
we have
call, yeah.
one
Roll
person
call,
on
so,
Zoom.
Karen, are you on?
She is, they're promoting her.
Karen?
Yep, give them. There we go.
I'm here. Can you hear
Oh,
me?
there she is. All right, and Gary
Cheeseman's here.
Deirdre Peretti,
we are joined with Steve Poulos, our town administrator, and Michelle McGovern. Okay, so anybody have anything to say?
Public input.
Public input. I'm going to say that's nobody wants to provide any public input. All participants wishing to address the Select Board during public well, never mind. Reports and announcement, town administrators update, and town announcements.
Yep. Thank you, Peter. A couple updates. So the CPA voted to award the $390,000, which was the delta between what we believe will have raised through grant funding, ARPA, and certain incentives through National Grids for the town hall HVAC. So that's great news. We're just waiting to hear on the grant. We remain to be hopeful on that. However, we have not heard any final word on that yet. The website is live, so we've gotten some good feedback, so we're happy. Again, I just want to thank the team here. Like, they certainly went above and beyond to make that happen. It was way more work than I think anybody realized at the onset, at least more than I realized for sure. We submitted our action plan, so we're now, and we got a letter confirming that Town of Wenham is now in interim compliance with 3A. And we also, as far as town meeting goes, we are anticipating a large crowd this year. So we had our building inspector go out and do the measurements and calculate the legal capacity of the rooms that we plan on being used. And we are looking at 30 people in the kindergarten. So we're going to reach out to the individual that will be Di Giuseppe, that will be helping coordinate the list of who will fill that, because we do have to be mindful of the capacity this year, because we do feel like we're going to have a full house. And at the last meeting, the board, I believe it was Ben Timon, asked us to look into the cost of doing an economic impact study of 3A. That cost is somewhere to have the folks that did the study for Cambridge Economics, who did our economic impact study, just a general economic impact study for the master plan. So we feel it gives them a leg up because they've already done the due diligence and have pulled the costing tables, they're estimating to do a economic study impact specifically of 3A in the range of $40,000 to $50,000. So that will come before the board probably next time, a little bit more detail to see if that's something that you'd like to do. We just hired a regional health inspector, Dennis Palazzo. So he was the part-time health director for the town of Hamilton, but we have recently expanded his role in the regional, the regional health agreement that we have between Ipswich, Rockport, Hamilton, and Wenham. And so this individual will be able to build out our inspectional services specifically, so that we can be more timely in our notification of required inspections, and something that, you know, we had Bobby Cody before, and now we have another individual that is filling that hole, but it's a very small amount of hours that we have in the regional service. The regional agreement does not allow us to offset any already budgeted for and services that are being provided, so we can only add to that. So, but this will be, it's something that we've always kind of struggled with, is, you know, not only getting someone out there in the field to make the inspection, but the background of, you know, what actually needs to be inspected in town, how often they have to be inspected, what forms have to be done. We've never really had that resource before. So that will be this person, yeah. And those are all the updates I have tonight.
The only thing I'll mention is that a judge ruled late yesterday, I guess, that they will not be accepting amicus briefs.
Yes, yeah, I saw that.
So, thinks it might get challenged, though. We'll see.
I just want to echo what Steve said and say thank you to the team for getting the website launched. I think it looks beautiful and it's really well done. And I particularly want to thank Steve, Joe, Michelle, and Kate Mallory and Land Use. I know they all put forth a tremendous effort. And we did hear about the website continually through the master plan process. So I think this is fantastic to have checked that right off the list. So thank you all.
And it's going to be at the Council on Aging next Wednesday at 1 o'clock, but it's not just for seniors, it's for all age groups. The Wenham Police Department will be talking about scams again. So if you're interested or been a victim or need information on that, next Wednesday at 1 p.m.
All right.
Karen.
Yeah, I apologize for not being present. Our house has shared the flu. It seems to be something I had hoped we wouldn't share together. But I am available. I apologize for having to cancel our office hours as well. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free. Hopefully we'll be able to reconvene those on Monday. But other than that, I'm all set.
Hope you get better soon.
And I just have one more, if I can.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Before we move on. I couldn't read my writing, so I skipped over. But the comment is that, so the 3 comments by the EOHLC for 3A zoning are due on Friday. So I sent an email to the board basically soliciting any feedback. However, if you feel the need to call a meeting, there's still time. We can call a meeting by Friday to discuss any specific additions. I also attach the comments that we made last round. The plan is to build out the comment. It was included, although it was only a couple sentences, but to build out, to kind of stress the fact that Hamilton, Wenham both share the train station. And it seems, logical that, it would be treated as if each one has their own train station. And I know planning board has some suggestions as well. So take a read and then, let me know. There's still time. What's that?
When did you send that?
10 minutes ago.
Oh, okay. All right.
12 minutes ago, maybe.
All right.
And when does that due back to the state?
Friday.
Friday, all right.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's all.
All right, so we'll move on to the consent agenda. routine items for approval in a single motion, allowing them to be passed without discussion unless held. A, minutes for open sessions on 12/17/2024 and 2/04/2025. B, appointments. Wenham Human Rights Committee, Daniel Reich, if I got that right, for a term starting February 18th, 2025 through June 30, 2027. Hamilton Wenham Joint Recreation Committee, Dennis Cronin, for a term starting February 18th, 2025 through June 30, 2025. Wow, Planning Board.
Can I interrupt right
Yeah.
now? So, with this planning board appointment, this is fresh news, but we just got, as we're working through the final verbiage for all our warrant articles, it came to our attention that in order to place the planning board on the warrant to be on the ballot, had to have had a vote 62 days prior to the town meeting. So we missed the deadline. But the alternative is, and I talked to Scott, texted him just moments ago, he is okay, and if the board is willing to extend the appointment through the next election, which would be April 9th, 2026.
What about the special election?
It has to align with a regular, actually, that's a fair point, I don't know the answer to that.
What are we doing, May 7th
What
or
was the
9th?
question? I didn't hear.
Well, we have the,
Would need a town meeting.
we need an
vote.
election more than 62 days away.
Right.
And as we have the
Oh, the special.
the special for the state representative, whether we can piggyback on that or not.
I don't have an answer to that.
All right.
June 7th or June 9th? I can't remember which it is.
Well, let's go as printed now,
Okay.
and then we can
Extended.
either extend or
Yeah.
put the double up on the election.
Let's see.
So, Planning Board, Scott Schoenberger, for a term starting February 18th, 2025 to June 9th? Or
No,
you
yes,
just-
we're gonna leave it this way.
Okay, and ending April 10th, 2025. Do we have a motion?
Yeah, I move to approve the minutes and appointments as read in the consent agenda.
Second.
All right, ready to vote? Peter votes yes.
Deirdre, yes?
Gary, yes?
Karen, yes.
All righty. New business, items for individual consideration. These items will allow for public comment, 10 minutes. Purpose, this comment period will allow for public comment on individual and will be held before or after the board's discussion of the agenda item at the discretion of the chair. Rules, 2 minutes per person. A person may speak only once. 10 minutes total per item unless noted on the agenda.
I think Bob Hicks
Go ahead,
is
Bob.
here
Yeah.
for, to make a presentation.
Okay,
So I can introduce.
yeah, that'd be great.
All right. So this evening, Bob Hicks, Burley Street, will be talking to us about a new 90-page pamphlet book that we've been working on for more than a year. And what it is the Treasures of Town Hall. So Bob Hicks and Diane Lang have cataloged, researched, and put together a new booklet that, for the first time, lists all the various artifacts in the town hall. And I think we plan to put this up on the website, and then probably hard copies at library, museum, and I'm thinking in here so that people can come in and do it yourself kind of tour. So introduce Bob Hicks.
I'm the product of the program in town for people that are old enough and poor enough to get some tax relief by work-off projects, and this is my work-off project. And it's a treasury not in financial terms, it's a treasury in the variety of things that were loved or treasured by somebody who took the trouble to put them on display at some time all around Town Hall. And so the survey ended up with a situation where I, in effect, decided to just take a, what do you call it, virtual walk around Town Hall and annotate everything. Given the time constraints of this sort of a meeting, I'm not going to linger long, but I thought I would hit some high spots to give you an idea of the sort of thing that is involved in this. And starting right in the room here, of course, and I won't hit everything either, but when you first come through the door, you may notice the back door, which is the real door at Town Hall. You may notice there's a quilt on the wall, Wenham, Mass., and it was given to the town by a woman who exhibited at Topsfield Fair in 2007 and won a prize. And it's not in this room here. Then, as you come further into the entry here, we find a bronze plaque. It's actually black on bronze, presented to John Darling for all of his work as chairman of the Town Hall Police Station Building Committee. This is recognition of private volunteer citizens. And then, befitting the town's national status, we are located as, we are registered as a National Historic Place in the United States of America. Coming in the entryway, as you climb the stairs, you may look around to the left and see a little bronze statue sitting back on the bench there. And that is a Jim Brady memorial statue. Jim Brady was the guy that was behind putting the maples together. And I guess that's one of Wenham's first types of structures of that sort on the old Meade property. And I don't know why it's a picture of Vietnam War veterans, but that was his choice, and there was nobody in the family around to tell me what it was chosen for. Then we got, right here is the big wall mural, and that was done by two families who did it in 2018 as part of the history, the anniversary. Mostly the children involved. I'm not naming names in all any of these things because there's way too many, but. And then complementing what they did, the state chose to send over 3 certificates, of which only 2 are now there. When I first did this, there were 3. One of them went away, and they were from the governor and the Speaker of the House of Representatives, complimenting the town on hanging around for 375 years. Then we have this map up here. There's several of these maps are scattered through the building. They're not exactly clear what they're for in some cases. It shows, this kind shows all the roads and water. So it has a unique little chart on the bottom of it. It turns out to be all the phone numbers of everybody of importance in Town Hall. And I'm not so sure that is valid anymore. You might try ringing up some of those numbers and not get anywhere. Then right over your heads here, totally unexplained, is a painting of a square-rigged sailing ship and the connection of sailing with Wenham is very remote. During the Salem heyday of sail, Wenham had some boat builders in it making dories and things, but there's no known reason for why that's here. And then hiding behind the flags at the moment is our father of the country, and it's, I believe, an unfinished painting. I think, Gary, you told me the name of it.
From Gilbert Stewart.
Gilbert Stewart painting, and it's a copy of that. I'm going through this more or less in the order of the room. When I did this a year or two ago, there was a selectman's table here, big 1885 table, and which has since departed the scene. But it had a lot of historic relevance in town, and we decided to keep it in there with a footnote to the effect that this will tell them what it was, even if it's gone bye-bye.
Well, it's actually just gone over the police station, right?
Yeah, we don't know what they're doing with it, and I didn't ask. And then the flag collection behind you includes a bunch of military flags, and the national flag, the state flag, and the town flag, and I thought maybe we'd like to just show this one up a little bit. Gary's going to do the honors. It was done It's a copy of the town seal created by the Hamilton Wenham Girl Scout Troop 615 after visiting the State House in 2004 and not finding it in the Hall of Flags. How about that? And now there it is. These flags are put out, incidentally, on the Veterans Day and Armistice Day. That's something else now. It's not Armistice Day anymore. Around the monument over there during ceremonies. Then there's a whole bunch of those flags. I'm not going to drag them all out and show them to you, but military ones, flags I didn't even know exist, like the United States POWMIA flag, for example. But the veterans group, I think, here in town had a lot to do with those, and it's quite a presentation. And then we come to first of several of those pictures of a whole bunch of people sitting at a banquet table, and it's 100 people, and you can't hardly recognize them. This one happens to be a testimony banquet in honor of the old timers, and it's from 1940. And people who were around town in those days might like to come in and see if they recognize any of the faces. You can't really, when you take a big photograph and reduce it to a little page on a book. But one of the most spoken favorably about things when we go out into the hall is the illustrated quilt that was built made in 2010 from ladies from the COA needleworkers. My wife at that time was involved in making one of it's a quilt, the squares, and she was involved in one of them. That seems to get a lot of really fine remarks about it, favorable in the town. The Constitution of the United States, a piece of boilerplate, is also hanging on the wall. And then we come to a haying scene, and it turns out this is a painting, a photograph that had no identification, and through some help from, I think, we got from the Wenham Museum. It's an excellent photograph. Benjamin Conant, the guy that took 4,000 pictures of town back 100 years ago, at Bachelor House, 62 Main Street on July 11th, 1891, a bunch of people piling up hay behind the stone wall in front of the mansion. Anybody interested in going to see the place, it's too late. It burned down in 1911. So then we get around to the end of the corridor with that full page from the Boston Post, Fights and Fun in the Old New England Town Meeting. It's a big cartoon, a poster, demonstrating all the people trying to get the moderator's attention one way or another. And so we made the Boston Post major paper with that. When I put this together, as we came out around the corner back to this door, the old wooden ballot box was there. I disappeared, and finally I had to ask Diane where it went, and it's in her room now, stuck in the back. I don't know why it left, but there's a table there now that has functional table with all paperwork on it for the public. One of the more interesting things that we come up with when we get into Diane's office, there's a small gold poster, and it's a social ball, a town hall Wenham in March 8, 1858, celebrating, I think, the town hall coming into being. It was kind of a society thing. And the interesting thing about it was that, this is a little more commentary, they opened the door to having public activities in the town hall. And over the years, a variety of public activities were held in the town hall. The town hall had a hall upstairs. And eventually, amongst other things, in the late 30s and 40s, in the Depression, when nobody could go anywhere and do anything, they started having some dances there. And a second floor was opened, tended by the young people and surrounding towns. However, the building shook with a whole lot of jitterbugging, to the extent that some people became concerned about the building's structural integrity, so the dances were halted. But it all started out with a kind of a gold-plated upper echelon type society thing. There are also a display of ceremonial plates hanging on the wall in there celebrating different things, mostly the 320th, 350th anniversary, and ones with images from the turn of the century, stuff like that. And then we come to a large rather dark painting of Wellington Poole, who was probably the most outstanding example of town clerk ever, 1870 to 1906. And he did just about everything in town, including working in the, I don't know what they called it, but the wagon that hauled the caskets from the church to the cemetery was his. And he also did the same kind of services for the church that he belonged to. There's a little retired town seal embossing punch. The thing that puts the embossed image of the town seal on papers. It's an electric one now. Well, this one is one with a big handle that you pull. And that's in the back over there also. Then we have maps, and there's quite a few maps of some interest. Wenham mapped in 1872. Wenham mapped in 1884. Interesting about the maps in those days, not only were the streets on there, but the houses were and the names of the people who lived in them. Then there's an Essex County mapped in 1856, in which Wenham, you find out how tiny it really is when you look at it in the middle of this map and all the surrounding towns. And then a Southern Essex map in 1856. There was a school that never was, and that was after World War II in the rush to do something about the population increase and educating the kids. A new school had to be built. And the second architect's thing was voted down. The first 3 tries didn't make it for various reasons. They couldn't get the land next door and so on. Finally, in the late 40s, they finally got rolling, and they had a mad rush to get the Buca School built because they were running out of place to put people. And so the school was one of the schools that never got built, but that was a $7,000 job. The architect's drawings got hung up on the wall here. No explanation why. And now one of them is gone. And the $7,000 never had to be paid because they never built the building. So stuff like that. There's one of those classic school pictures you get, the whole class sitting on the school steps. And it's a school group picture. Doesn't say when, but judging by the outfits on them, it's pre-1900, probably late 1880s. Then there's things that have no explanation. There's 2 big trucks of the World War II era, open trucks, and both of them, people are sitting there all dressed up, and it looks like the trucks belong to a moving company, and it appears to be some kind of a parade in which the moving company's trucks are carrying spectators. Again, no explanations. Old Enon gets a nod, as it has been quite a lot. This is a picture of the Wenham Fire Department in formal pose in its glory days, and we did a little backstory on that, explaining that we used the fire department's explanation pictorially of how does Enon number 1 work, because people often wonder how that thing that's up in the building there actually functions. Then another one of those group pictures. I don't know how they do it. The photographers had something called wild angle lenses. The thing's about this long and about this wide, and there's 100 people in it, all lined up. And this one is Men of Wenham Club. I couldn't find out what it was. In 1915, having an outing at Canterbury Lake. Now that's the sort of thing, who put that up? Somebody in the club, probably, but no credit given. We then move on to the bronze tablet memorializing the Wenham soldiers in World War I. Used to be outside in the front hall somewhere. Now it's in the interior hall. It's kind of in the dark in that little narrow part of the front hall leading to the empty front hall. And two people were victims of the war. And one of them was Norman Prince, and because it needed a little elaboration, and the American Legion post for years was the Norman Prince post to the American Legion, I did run a backup story about Norman Prince and why he was who he was.
So
then
Bob,
we go out into the outer front hall.
so I think we're time-wise, we got to move on a bit. But as you speak about some of the items that have no background information,
Yeah.
you're going to continue on this project, right? As
What
people
I
have
say- what I
information
say
coming
at the
in?
end, what I will say now is that anybody that that reads this or looks at it will find a message to the effect, if they have anything they can contribute to enlighten us on the mysteries, they can email it to me, and I can respond to it and see what we can do. And then if it does a change, we'll make a change, because you can drop a page in and out of the PDF without any trouble. So we'll see what happens. We go out into the front outer hall, and it's kind of lonesome out there. There's a nice wooden varnished chair with nothing on it and no explanation. And somebody told me that a professional real estate, not real estate, antique dealer had a good look at it, and he couldn't figure out anything about it. So that's a mystery. We turn the corner, go upstairs, and we come out on the upstairs, and on your left is a big satellite photo of the town of Wenham. Now, of course, it's as big as a store window, but you can't see a thing about the details other than it's a busy-looking place. And I think if you went there with magnifying glass, you might be able to see something. Then we turn around and we come to one of the piece de resistance of the town, the Sealer Weights and Measures cabinet. This is a very imposing, big, dark varnished cabinet full of wonderful polished brass and pewter devices and scales, all the things used by the town's sealer of weights and measures to keep anybody selling stuff in town honest. And that thing was acquired in 1850 from the state, and it ran until 1965, when the state took over the job, and it ran out of work, so it ended up on the second floor here. A little sideline to that was, in looking at that, which was this high, I noticed a wooden handle sticking out over the top. So I was able to reach it and pull it down, and it was a shovel. And it was a square steel shovel, all black, and the handle was all black, and it looked just like the kind of shovel you would shovel coal into a furnace. And so I speculated that may have been something from the basement that used to fire the furnace here when they burned coal, which I assumed they did. Again, no explanation, and that's just a guess. But somebody put it there, and it stayed there. So over and head, way up high, we find two bygone selectmen, briefly, Sam Connery from the 30s and 40s, and Marjorie Davis from a long history of town work as a select woman, and then she's an MBTA rep, I think, for many years. Then when the 325th anniversary came to town, lo and behold, some people came over from England, from Little Wenham in England, and they ended up in the anniversary parade in a place of honor. But they sent a wonderful poster, residents of two parishes of Great Little and Wenham, sincere greetings and so forth, and congratulations, and all that. Research into Little and Big Wenham in England found out it was a single piece of property owned by one family with two different historic stone buildings upon it, one of which they lived in. And it was somehow or other in the English setup considered to be a village. So then amongst the plaques, we get a lot of plaques from recognition of people who did things for the town. And there's a bright brass one up in the conference room. It's so bright that I was unable to get a picture of it in any form without getting a reflection off the middle of it from the light. But it was presented to Joseph Harrington, because for 29 years he was the town meeting moderator and set quite a standard for moderating town meetings. So that is up there. Then we have some other tributes to the town. The Selectmen's Association gives first prize to Wenham for excellence of its town report in 1967. And then there's a 1766 original, think about that, letter, handwritten, of town accounts, and it was donated by the Dearborns in good condition. It's 257-year-olds report of tax collections for the King of England. And that's, then we come to some more maps over in the land use or planning office, I'm not sure what you call it. There's a county street map. It's about it's about as big as this white area here. It's so big that it's pre-electronic. You can find any street in the map. It's got a pin in the middle, and it's got a long cord all marked on it, and you could walk around that thing and look at the numbers and look at it to find the street you wanted. This was pre-technology, and that's it. And then we have the current West Wenham Park architects rendering. It's nice to see that's happening. Then we have what they call a composite map of Wenham. There are several of them, and there's no really explanation of what it is, except it's a big map on a wall, and you can kind of sit at your desk and glance at it and look at the major features without getting up. The people over there also have a wetlands poster with all the functions and values on it, 26 by 20 on illustrated color poster. Moving on into the back part of upstairs, we find a small picture of a Huss team and two Huss teams grading a gravel road with no explanation, and it's only 7 inches by 5. And it's in good condition, but it was town road meeting, obviously in the pre-motor vehicle era, and it would have been grading the road after the spring mud season had subsided to get it flat and firm again for buggy use. Then they had a selection of few random scenes. The Wenham Rec Center, the center school as it was, and a shot of Wenham Lake, not a very good one. I attended the center school completely from 2nd grade through 9th grade, incidentally. And then we moved next door to the Congregational Church, the steeple with the clock, and then down below it, the Civil War monument, which somebody tells me is called I'm sorry, what it calls it. Forgive the mind, it's worn out. And moving on, the planting scheme for the Iron Rail Cemetery is posted. Then we come to another town report recognition, Selectmen's Association, first prize for the excellence in 1970. Wenham, incidentally, being in the 5th population group. Then the 325th anniversary in Wenham got recognition, proclamation, and then when I went into, I ran into some more workaday ones. There's a FEMA flood hazard map to show where all the flood hazards are in town. And then there's a map, a combined road map of Hamilton and Wenham roads, quite detailed, but with no explanation for why it exists. Now we arrive at another celebration. Here is a bunch of people sitting at a dining room once again, and this is the Idlewood Groves 50th anniversary banquet. I think people who were around back in those eras as kids might find some of those interesting to see. The recently noticed Arbor Day Foundation recognition that the town is undertaking, they had a nice new plaque put up, and that's featured, together with a page describing the Heritage Tree Program and showing the map. Wenham also received from the Commonwealth, Massachusetts, be known that the town of Wenham, having met criteria, is designated as a green community. So we're getting kind of green here, it would seem. And I mentioned in the Heritage Tree Program that this is all about helping to protect trees, and Wenham has got plenty of trees right now that didn't have 100 years ago. And in the early days of the Village Improvement Society, one of their objectives was to plant trees in the barren downtown of Wenham to beautify it. And I always got a kick out of the Wenham Improvement Society name. It wasn't the Wenham Beautifying Society. It was a group of well-to-do women at that time that organized it, and they just figured the town needed some fixing up. So anyway, we're a green community. And then very recently, and interestingly time with the recent meeting they've been having here about water supplies and what to do about them, a Commonwealth of Massachusetts Public Water System Award to the Wenham Water Department for outstanding performance and achievement in the large and medium community systems category. That's very recent history, but it joins the history claim. We have an original map of the historic district. That was only about, what, when was it? Oh, back around 1970 or some 60s. Further back?
Perhaps, we'll see.
Huh?
I'm not sure.
Okay, well, anyway, this one is not it's a very well-drawn map. It shows every house and street and all that in the district. And then following that is a town zoning map, and you find out when you look at that, there's only 2 or 3 tiny little spots of red where the zoning is, but it has a lot of detail about all the streets, and it shows property boundaries on all of the properties as well, all in a little page like that. It's an amazingly detailed piece of work. There is a aerial photograph taken of Greater Downtown with the town center in the middle and the tennis court area on one side and again, memory fails me, the original limited home up there, just opposite, on Maple Street, just opposite Cherry. That one, yeah. And then off in the distance, the picture down on Larch Row where the farm projects are going on. Then we have a nice color photograph of the Civil War Monument and the first church. Oh, I know what it was now. Somebody said they call that Monument Square, but I haven't been able to verify it because of the fact that it's sort of a square with a railing around it. Then we got another one of these kind of maps showing up. And then we come to the Witch of Wenham. And this is interesting. There's a single page of John Greenleaf Whittier's narrative poem, The Witch of Wenham. But because it's a really nice poem to read and interesting, I chose to give it 3 more pages and print the whole thing, which is quite a read. And the thing about it that caught me was that he's from Haverhill, but he was living in Danvers at the time when he wrote this. And it's a romanticized discussion of, excuse me.
I think Karen Anger may have a question for you.
What's that? I'm deaf, I don't know what's going on.
So
You're on mute.
Oh, sorry. I just had a quick question. Because I'm on screen, I wasn't aware if the Finance Committee was trying to come in or not. I just didn't want to not be able to give them the opportunity to come in. So I just wanted to see if that was a possibility.
This is only because I had a time frame, but I'm welcoming if you wish. It's just going to stretch me out, or I just won't finish. That's either way.
yeah, I think, Bob, we're probably running on time here.
Yeah, well, that's what I say. I'm almost at the end.
Right.
The thing that's about Witch of Wenham is he romanticized the whole thing, and at the end, the hero rode up on horseback to where she was imprisoned in the attic, ready to be taken to Salem to be hung, and they rode off to New Hampshire to save. The real thing that happened to Wenham's witch is they took her over to Salem and hung her. So he kind of changed the story just a little bit. The tea house and the hob house, 2 paintings of those are in there, discussing them. And then we come to the favorite map, which is Rupert Lilly's big map of 1976. That was the 200th anniversary of the country. And his beautiful hand-drawn map showing the town features and all the roads and all the houses and all the names of all the houses. And you can actually read them all if you look at them in the hall. You can't in this picture. It's a big map. But it's really kind of a great picture. As we leave upstairs, out through the stairs, heading down, thinking we're all done, there's 3 little photographs on the wall at the head of the stairs, and it appears to be World War I veterans gathering down somewhere, maybe in Railroad Square near the Trout store, and getting into trucks to ride away, probably for a parade. There's no explanation whatever of any of them. And because one of the trucks has got a World War I Army tank in it, and the other two have little bleacher seats built into the back of them, and they're getting ready for a parade, it appears. Having done all this, we got out the back door, and as you go around to where we came in, you'll see the memorial bench over there in the corner, and that's in memory of Ruth Conant Smith, who served the town from 1972 to 1988 as a secretary to the board. She passed away in 2008. I knew her while I was on the planning board in those years when she was secretary to the board. That is a somewhat hurried and quick highlighting because you can't do more with it. But anything that grabs you on it, you can find on the PDF once we get it on the town website. And anybody that wants, I'm not too knowledgeable, but anybody that wants to contribute or inquire, I'm happy to chat with them. Or email is better because I'm so deaf that I have a lot of trouble with the phone, even though I got high-zoo hearing aids. So there you are, and I would like to say that it's kind of nice that the town found an interesting way for me to help abate my property tax some. Thank you very much.
Yes. God, I can't wait to see that online.
Well, Gary,
Should be up shortly, right?
you have this PDF?
PDF?
You do?
No, do we have it? I don't think we have it yet.
Well, Gary, my daughter sent it to you.
All right, so you'll have it in the morning.
We'll have
Yeah.
it soon. Thank you very
All right,
much.
thank you.
We'll get it
Thank
up.
you.
I'm
Yeah,
not
thank you,
sure,
Bob.
I don't
Very
know if this is a
interesting.
great rush. This has been almost 2 years for me because of intervening issues. But it's going to be there, and it's as comprehensive as I told you, but we know there's stuff that could still be said. And so that's why we want to emphasize to those so interested, they can contact me to find out what, if anything, we can do, or to help us to add to it. Okay?
Wonderful.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you,
All right,
Bob.
you're welcome.
All right, so, D, discussion and potential vote to select capital plan proposal to go on the 2025 annual town meeting warrant, joint with Finance and Advisory Committee. I think we don't have a quorum.
Yeah, we have two. We've got a couple traveling, so we are posted, but we do not have a quorum tonight.
Yeah, so I think we can proceed as planned. I think, before we get into the capital, we're going to take this opportunity. We're hopeful that a quorum of the Finance Committee would be here, but even still, Jeff is going to provide a brief overview of the budget, where it stands this far. There won't be any, you won't be asked to make any decisions tonight. The Finance Committee will continue to evaluate the budget, and we'll be back on the 4th with another joint meeting with any recommendations that they have. And then we will get into the capital plan.
Yeah, and I did mention that the FinCom members would have the ability to weigh in as well, even though we don't have a quorum, and I hope that stands.
Okay. Yep.
So we're just going to jump into the.
Yeah, if you want to just jump into the finance overview.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I circulated this to the FinCom today, and I sent it to Steve. I don't know if it's been sent to everyone. We did have a big change to the budget on Friday. We've been waiting for a couple big ticket items, one of which was the Essex Tech apportionment. They met Thursday night and went over their tentative budget. We knew we had 2 new students in the system there, so we've gone from 16 to 18, and ultimately that works out to about a $50,000 increase for us. So that was one big ticket item, and the other was that health insurance through Maya, the employee health insurance, came in with their FY26 proposed increase, which came in for us and just about everybody around us that I've talked to at about 19.92%. So that was a bigger driver than we were thinking. We were kind of holding it at 10%, which is usually around where the cap is. So this page here is really just a quick summary to kind of give you some key drivers. You know, we spoke at the beginning of the season. The Select Board and the Finance Committee agreed, you know, as a first objective was to avoid an override for the year. The Finance Committee, on top of that, was still interested in exploring to find more cuts beyond just simply getting under the levy limit, and that's something we're still exploring. But the big drivers, I just touched on a couple, but the Hamilton Wenham School District is going up, over 5.5%. It's 712,000 or so of an increase. The Essex Tech, as I just mentioned, percentage-wise is about 17.4%, $50,000 in total. Then we have a couple of small items, in dollar. They might be large percentage amounts, but they're smaller dollar amounts. But street lighting is a budget that we've captured too low the last several budget cycles, so we have increased that to get back to kind of right size that budget to be where it should be. So a large percentage increase, but $6,000 or so just to get that right size. Refuse collection next year will be the big year for the trash contract, but this has a smaller built-in COLA for this year for trash collection, and then trash disposal is going to go up about 10%, and so you're going to see a $23,000 increase in refuse collection there. Library, which we discussed at another meeting, only up about 17,000, a 1.6% increase, mainly just driven by contractual increases and also the guidelines that they have to follow to be eligible for state aid and to continue to belong to sharing organizations, so we can, within the Merrimack Valley Library Consortium, we can share books between libraries and that sort of thing. Joint recreation, another area where historically that budget has been too low, so we're making a one-time adjustment of about 11% or 12,000 to get that budget up to where it really should have been for the last couple of years. The employee benefits, big driver. There's the big increase I was telling you about in health insurance, but the first one there is 11%, a little over 11%, which is $116,000 for our share of the pension. And that's mainly being driven by the apportionment calculation, where Wenham has risen from 2.05% to 2.14% of total payroll for the unit, the entire Essex Regional Retirement Unit. So that means our percentage share is creeping up, and that's why we would probably, if we stayed stable, probably would have been closer to a straight 10%, but we're picking up a little bit more than our share from last year. Health insurance is the big one, almost 20%. This is a budget line item that typically returns $100,000 to $200,000 to free cash each year. We made a conscious effort this year to try and reduce the free cash generation from underspending this budget and sort of right-size it a little bit. So we were only going up about 3.5% or so previously. Now we're going to go up 7.25%, so which is $85,000. If we were to just strictly take last year's budget and add the 19.92%, this budget would actually be going up about $230,000 or so. You can see here it's only going up 85. We still feel reasonably comfortable. We have enough money in the budget to cover insurance for employees. The big issue there is folks who come on or folks who are on maybe on a single plan and get married, have a family, and suddenly the cost goes up. So we feel reasonably comfortable, but folks should realize that FY26 free cash generation is likely going to be down $150,000 from this line item, which within our targets for free cash generation is probably fine, but I just want people to be mindful of that heading into this. General liability insurance, we're carrying 7.5% increase there, $15,000 based on input from our brokers at Maya. OPEB, 10% increase, but it's $10,000 as part of our funding schedule, which, as we've talked about before, is we're sort of increasing funding to this $10,000 a year until the pension is fully funded in 2035, and then we'll begin to go after the OPEB liability a little bit more aggressively. And the final piece of this puzzle is that we are currently in contract negotiations with the police union, the Call Fire Union, and the AFSCME, DPW clerical unions. We've set aside an amount for that, and I crunched some numbers over the weekend. I think we're still on track that the number we have will be sufficient, and that's built into this budget that will get us the final tax rate analysis number, which is $8,000 or so under the levy limit. If you want to move to the... So this is, you've probably seen this a few times from me now. This is just a quick snapshot look of what the budget looked like last year, or the year we're in, FY25, and what we're projecting FY26 to look like. Generally speaking, expenses are up about 5.17%, which looks like about $1,260,000, $261,000. That is largely driven by the big ticket items I mentioned, the school increases, the pension increase, and the health insurance increase, along with the reserve for the contracts. Those make up just under $1.23 million, or 5.04% of that 5.17% total increase. So essentially, the rest of the budget is up $31,000, or 0.13% across all other departments and line items. So generally speaking, departments out of the gate took the Finance Committee objective to to try to keep budgets as low as they could, and we'll see a little bit more detail on the next page. The top part is your expenses, and then we have some additional amounts to be raised here, which are state offsets to state aid, which is we get charged back things like mosquito control district, MBTA. We get charged for having MBTA in the town, and then assessor's overlay, which is just yeah.
Say that again?
So every town gets assessed share of certain things from the state. So if you
The MBTA one.
So the MBTA, if you're an MBTA community, there's an assessment for having the MBTA in your community. So even Essex, which has no actual MBTA in the town, we still get a smaller charge because we're MBTA accessible in their eyes. But this is, and we're talking, it's about $120,000. It's a big charge. So it's the gift that keeps on giving. Assessor's overlay, $200,000. That's just, think about that as that's the account you set aside for your abatements. And there's some minimums that we have to fund that with, but $200,000 has been pretty consistently enough money for that each year. Then you see the state aid, which we're actually expecting a bit of an increase. So we're going up about 5.7% on the aid. And at the same time, the assessments above are only going up 3.61%. So our net state aid is still going up about $26,000 in total when you mix those two things up. Estimated local receipts is really the biggest driver of our revenue, other than state aid and also tax receipts, property tax receipts. This is something you've probably heard me talk about in the past. The DOR limits how much we can increase this estimate each year. So we are going up about 8.23% there, about $230,000. But the reality is that number at $3,032,000, almost $3,033,000, is still about $322,000 less than we collected last year. And so that's 2 years from, that's FY26. So 2 years from now, we will have a gap of more than that 322. But that's, just the example of how that system works with the DOR, is that they're always having us estimate conservatively, which, can have an effect, because that's ultimately what determines the tax rate, is the net amount of our expenses after all these revenue streams. So that gives us, 3.6, almost 3.63 million of revenue, So it says to us, okay, we have to raise essentially $22.4 million, which is roughly a 4.69% increase there over the prior year. And then the bottom part of this calculation is this is the levy limit, and this is where we compare what we need to raise, the net taxation amount, with what the state says we're allowed to raise. And that is comprised of your levy limit, which is the prior year levy limit, plus 2.5%, and then any new growth for that year, which will be certified by the DOR, in December of each year. We use an estimate of 150,000. You can see last year it was 223. We've got some numbers, 3, 5, 7, 10-year numbers that indicate we could probably go up on that number and estimate closer to 200,000 there. I think in talking with Steve, we tend to be more conservative here because if we run into a problem in December when we're trying to set the tax rate and for some reason new growth comes in lower than we were planning on, you can run into a situation where you need to have another town meeting if the DOR won't work with you to close the gap, depending on how big that is. And the final piece of that is the debt exclusions. So these are debt exclusions we've voted for our own debt at the town level, and also debt exclusions that we've voted for at the school level. So there's a small amount of, actually the debt at the tech is not exempt, but for us, all of the debt at Hamilton Wenham is exempt. I think Hamilton, for some reason, has 1 or 2 pieces of debt that are not exempt at the school. So, when we look at those two things, we're $8,000 under the levy limit. The reality is when we set that tax rate, we'll probably be lower than that, but right now that's our best guess estimate. And what that ultimately means is we would be looking at a 73-cent tax increase from the $15.54 at currently to $16.27 that would be the proposed tax rate under this budget if it were to be approved and passed. If you want to go to the next page. This just gives you a quick summary, of the budgets. So you can see general government, public safety, they're both actually down year over year. Education is the big driver there. Public Works, 13,467 change for the year, almost entirely driven by the trash collection. Culture and Rec, that's going to come down to the small increase at the library and the adjustment to the Joint Rec Department. Employee benefits is driven by pension and health insurance, and the rest of them are just smaller down the line. The general insurance going up to 7.5%, the $10,000 increase to OPEB, the reserve, and then the water, which we include in the way we vote the budget here in Wenham. We include water all in that article, but the reality is that water, the water expenses are, those are covered by water rate utility collections, so it's sort of a neutral. I book $598,000 of expenses, and then on the local receipts side, I'm assuming I have exactly the same amount of local receipt coming in for water utility bills. So that just shows you again sort of the 5.17 increase on the expenses. Next page is just more detail. I don't think we have to really, belabor it. It does just kind of walk you through sort of where we're having some of these, savings. We've reduced the utility reserve at the town hall line item by 70,000 now that we've, we're not in, as inflationary a time as we were a couple years ago when we set that up. The police have managed to cut about $25,000 out of their budget, mainly because we're no longer having to send folks to the Bridge Academy. That time has passed, so that's $25,000 that can come out of the budget. Permitting, so the building permits, which we is a joint program with Hamilton. For those of you who don't know, we switched software for folks doing their online permitting last year, and now the cost is absorbed by the person applying for the payment, for the permit. So that $3,000 that we used to allot for software in the permitting line item has now been moved out and has been shifted to the person who's actually incurring the service. Next page is, I think, pretty static. Not really, yeah. I mean, the highway department has managed to cut 15,000 or so, mainly some of the maintenance items that they've gotten ahead of in recent years. I think Rich has been able to pull out of the budget for this year. And the rest of the stuff, I think I kind of walked through there. You can see the street lighting and all of that. I think go to the next page. And then, yeah, having retirement, group insurance, all that stuff that we sort of covered. And again, just a little more detail, getting you down to the 1.261 million and the 5.17%. Next page. Yep. So this page I dedicated to free cash, and it sort of opens up a different discussion, which we really haven't had in detail at the FinCom yet. We started to talk about it a little bit last week, but it's the idea which we started last year, where we have certified free cash. We typically use it for capital, but after you use it for capital, what else do you do with it? And last year we made some pretty heavy commitments to stabilization. An extra 900,000 or so into stabilization. We put an extra 300,000 or so into the OPEB trust, and then we carried over $450,000 or $500,000, I think, in total. So the question was posed: well, what do we do this year? Do we want to put more money into stabilization? Do we want to put more money into OPEB? And so I'm just sort of walking through some of our options here. So I think if we were assuming that we were to fund all $1.3 million of capital, which includes the $500,000 for the HVAC in this building, which we're all hopeful will actually be covered by a grant, we would have $800,000 left if we were to spend the full $1.3 million on capital. So if we, in our draft financial policies, we have a target of keeping about 1% to 2% of the operating budget available in free cash to carry over. So based on those targets, we could spend another $300,000 to $550,000, on stabilization, different things. And so there's a few things here. We're looking at setting up revolving funds for both the ambulance and permitting. On the ambulance fund, we probably want to look at maybe putting upwards of, something in the range of $50,000 into that fund. And I would point out that a large amount of your free cash is actually generated by ambulance receipts. So returning $50,000 of those funds to the ambulance to be used in an account to pay for future ambulance repairs and maintenance as needed in an emergency, to pay for, I think I've mentioned before, the cost of when we receive ambulance payments. In many cases, we have to share those with another ambulance service or an ambulance service from, say, Manchester by the Sea. And it creates a timing difference and a timing issue for us paying those expenses out. So putting this money into this revolving fund would allow us to sort of mitigate that timing problem. So I think $50,000 here, at least in the first year, to sort of see how it works out is probably advisable. The permitting revolving fund probably just needs sort of a nominal amount of money in there, so $1,000 in there to pay the fees, because there is, even though it's being borne by the applicant now, there is a lag between when we incur the fee and when we receive the fee from the resident. So this, having $1,000 in this account would help with that timing issue. So then the question becomes, do we put money into the stabilization or OPEB based on our targets? And right now, based on what's in that fund with the big contribution this year in stabilization, we're at roughly 6.2%. And now our target here is 5 to 7, so we're pretty safely within that target. So I don't know that there's a huge amount of urgency to fund this much higher. And then in OPEB, we made a large contribution there last year on top of the $100,000 that we did as part of the operating budget. That's now at about 17% of our OPEB liability. Last year at this time, before we made the big gift, we were down in the 5% range. So we've made good headway there, and I think we have a reasonable plan to address that over the next 10 years before the pension is paid off. And then once the pension is paid off, we have a good plan to fund that in full. So I think we're probably okay there, but certainly that's up to debate between the FinCom and the Select Board. But the idea that I had over the weekend was that one of the best places we might actually be able to deploy some of this money is we currently have about $450,000 or $500,000 of outstanding short-term debt that is paid, roughly we're paying $150,000 a year each budget cycle to pay this down. If we were to take, and to do this before the end of the fiscal year, so at town meeting, we would vote to spend $353,000 in May, and pay these notes off in full when the short-term notes roll over in May, that would do a couple of things. One, it would remove $149,000 from the FY26 budget, so it would actually reduce. We're looking at the tax rate going up about 4.7% as it's laid out earlier in this presentation. That would actually reduce next year's increase to just under 4%. It would reduce it to 3.99%. And what it would also do is it would save you probably $35,000 to $40,000 in additional interest payments over the next couple of years. So just sort of in terms of a return on investment, as compared to sitting in a stabilization account in essentially a money market account based on the Mass General law for investing stabilization funds, this probably makes a little bit of sense, and in my mind made a little bit more sense than even the stabilization or the OPEB funding.
Jeff, who makes that decision?
So the FinCom, I literally came up with this over the weekend, so I will discuss this with the FinCom on Wednesday, and certainly get their thoughts. But I thought it was appropriate to kind of get it in front of you folks tonight too, just to gauge if you had any thoughts for or against that as well. We don't have to do any of these things, but there is something nice to locking these funds up into something rather than just having them roll over year in free cash that's not maybe as locked down. The only counter to that, and this would still leave us $400,000 plus in free cash even after doing all this. The only argument I would make for keeping a little bit more free cash in our coffers heading into next year is that the trash contract is a great unknown for us, and we've heard horror stories for several years in many communities about how big an increase that was going to be. Some communities were worried it would be 60-80% increases. I don't think it's been playing out that way, but in Wenham it's a bit more challenging because one, you have no transfer station and you have curbside pickup. So you don't have as many options to do something different to try to mitigate the increased cost. And two, it's all covered within the tax rate now. So folks don't typically like to have trash service for free, and then next year they get charged for the tax, the trash service. So keeping a little bit of extra free cash in the hopper for the next couple of years might allow us to use a little bit of free cash each year. If it is a very material increase for the trash collection, we could, over the next 3-4 years, use free cash to sort of mitigate that increase each year and sort of gradually step it in. And it might be a way to help us continue to have trash service that the residents have come to expect and appreciate, and still have it continue under the tax rate, which I think for most of us would be the goal. And nobody likes to live in a community where they feel the taxes are high already, and then suddenly they're paying out of pocket additionally for a service that they are, yesterday they received. I think you probably went through something similar when you had the leave collection a few years ago. So that's one area where I would make a case for maybe holding on to a little free cash. I mean, we just don't know enough yet about how big an increase this is going to be and how tough it will be to absorb within the tax rate. But that's one area where, it's certainly in the back of my mind.
Well, Jeff, obviously, we'll wait for FinCom to come up with a recommendation, but paying off these notes and getting that tax increase under 4%.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was
attractive.
Yeah, I thought so. And I guess the counter to it is if it just continues to sit in free cash, and even with today's rates, if it's earning 3-4%, it's almost better served paying off that debt, which is we have the short-term debt is partially exempt and partially taxable, and so what that means, sort of from the investment side, is that the debt that we have that is exempt, think of those as muni bonds in someone's investment portfolio. They're tax-free muni bonds, so we're paying a lower interest rate on those bonds because tax effective to people, they're willing to take a lower interest rate because they're tax exempt to them. So that bond, we're paying, 5.17% on, I think. The bond that's taxable and is not tax exempt to the investor, we're paying 6.54% on. So those are some pretty steep interest charges, and I know there's some hope interest rates will drop, but as of right now, you hope they will in a more long term. But I think in the near term, when we have to redo these bonds in May, I don't know that the bond market will have adjusted down significantly enough to lower those rates too much. So that was just sort of my thinking as I walked through this over the weekend. Next page. I don't. What's on the next? And this is the tax rate recap again, but walking you through how this is now 3.99% rather than 4.7%. And so you'll see that up top, the expenses are $150,000 lower because we don't have those bond payments. What's interesting, and it's sort of a quick lesson in tax levy limits, you can see up above that the expenses went down $150,000, but down below, the debt exclusions only went down $61,810. And that's because one of the bonds is tax exempt under Prop 2.5, and one of the bonds is not. So the other, roughly $80,000, $90,000 is a bond that's included under the tax rate, and therefore it doesn't reduce our debt exclusion. But that was just a quick layout there. So you can see, it shows it side by side. We went from being potentially $8,000 under the levy limit in the original proposal, with using the bond pay down strategy actually puts you closer to $100,000 under the levy limit. So I just thought that might be an interesting way for folks to kind of see it next to each other. I think now this is probably sliding, and the next slide might go to capital, but we'll see. Yeah, and this brings us to capital, so maybe that's a good place to stop and have some discussion around operating budgets from the select board, and also from the FinCom member. Dano is here, and Bob Papatic is on the line as well, and I think he told me he's under Robert and not Bob is the one he'll be speaking under.
And so just a reminder that the 4th is pretty much our drop dead date for anything that's going to be included in the warrant and mailed out to residents. We'll still have one more meeting to make adjustments to the final warrant, although, generally we try really hard to have as close to final of a warrant go out in the mail. So although you're not making any decisions tonight, please use this opportunity. If you saw anything you wanted to comment on or had some concerns, voice them now, so that we have a couple weeks to gather any additional information. The Finance Committee can discuss them, make any recommendations if warranted, and so I guess just don't hold back, because we got this meeting and next meeting, and we're hoping to finalize both the budget and the capital warrant articles by then.
And actually, just to add one more point, we do also have some reductions that were proposed by departments as part of what they were tasked with by the Finance Committee. And those total about $162,000, $165,000 of additional reductions to the budget you just saw. But I think a lot of those would lend themselves to some more discussion between the Select Board and the Finance Committee, because you would be looking at things that would certainly be some reductions to existing services. So I think we will want to have more discussion between the two boards on that. Not to say we can't enact any of these. I think they're the departments certainly put them forward as possibilities. Certainly not anything they were advocating strongly, but they were tasked with doing this, so they came up with things. And so I'll just use the example of in my department. Looking at my department, I certainly would prefer not to cut staff, cut one of my folks to a half-time person or something. So I would elect to reduce the new budget software that we just purchased and will be rolling out as part of the supplementary budget information that goes out in March. I would prefer to not use that rather than lose staffing or anything like that. The board may have other ideas and say, well, once we see it rolled out, you know, we really like it and we don't want to see that reduced. But as a department head, that would be my choice if I had to figure out where to find 20,000.
Yeah, and, you know, we've been, as we said, in a, I believe it was an executive session, but it's, we've been reluctant to discuss specifically the proposals for reductions that came up because, you know, as a small town, when we identify services, generally you're talking about, you know, a person's job, and, you know, staff, understandably so, follows the budget process. So we've been hesitant to, you know, to put things, so to speak, on the chopping block. So understanding that, you know, somebody's looking at it and being like, well, that's my whole role. You know, so generally they come by way of small part-time, few hours a week type positions that would be eliminated, small services. But that's kind of why we've been reluctant to, you know, actually discuss the specifics of it. However, you know, as you know, Jeff has said, and I agree, is, you know, our offices are always open and we're happy to have offline conversations if you'd like some more information on that.
The really big question remains the $500,000 grant. Do we have any update on the timeline for that? No.
We were, I mean, by all accounts, we would have known by the end of January, and we don't know. So we don't know if it's being, I don't know, walked through a little bit slower with the 3A, where these grants are typically big money, or if they're just a little bit behind, but we haven't heard. We've reached out. They've, you know, been just no information yet.
So like the idea on paying off the debt, but perhaps we ought to have the comparison. I know OPEB and the trust funds have state restrictions on how it's invested. So what is our current rate of return on our invested funds? Because
I mean, historically, OPEB is probably in the high 5 to 6 range because it can be invested like a real investment portfolio. Right. Stabilization, you know, one of the things that's on the town meeting warrant is the potential adoption of the prudent investor rule.
Right.
Stabilization and CPA funds actually are exempt from the prudent investor rules. The idea being, I think, the stabilization fund is your rainy day money, and the state views that as, you know, protect principal at all costs. They adhere to what is the typical investment rule, which is safety, liquidity, and yield. And then with CPA, I think they sort of view that they don't want you hoarding those funds and investing them. They want you turning those around quickly and deploying them. So on OPEB, and I've made this argument in Essex before, where, geez, you know, where else can you put the money that, you know, there's nowhere else in town we can put it that could say, you know, could earn you potentially 6% or something like that. Here, because you're comparing it to paying off sort of high interest rate debt, it's a little bit different than, you know, normally I would be saying, well, you can leave it in a money market account earning back in the day, you know, 1.5%.
The stabilization fund, those funds, how much are we making on those?
I would say probably in the 4 range,
right,
you know, on the high end.
And that's much increased over the last few years too, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, several years ago, that was certainly in the
But
one.
still, the paying off the debt, just cranking out the numbers sounds like a great deal financially, as well as the effect it'll have on the tax rate, a little bit at least.
And if you'll indulge me, just an extra minute, that I forgot that the last slide, this is something that, you know, largely Bob Papatic has been working on with me, but he's done a lion's share of the work. But one of the things we've been focused on is trying to look at ways to compare Wenham to other communities. And one of the difficulties with comparing small communities to others is that there's a sort of a bare minimal amount of service you have to provide. If you're going to have a police department, you know, you need two people on duty, you need a police chief, you need certain things, whether you're a town of 2,500 or 4,500 or whatever. So small towns tend to not look good on a per capita basis on a lot of things. You know, so for example, because I always use them, but, you know, Essex on a per capita basis looks worse than Wenham, not because they spend more money, but because they have, you know, 700 less people. So the per capita numbers don't look good. But we're looking across total expenditures, education, different, functions, general government, public safety, those type of things. We're looking at all kinds of different areas. And one of the things Bob is sort of latched onto is this idea of looking at median household income and doing a linear regression with per capita expenditures, either in total or for a certain function, and how the impact of that in this trend analysis against median household income. And one of the things we found is that on a total expenditure line and education, what we tend to see is that even towns that are of similar size to us, at lower median household income, the expenditures tend to be lower for towns of maybe similar size, but as you move to the right across median household income, the expectations for services rise, on the slope of the line, as household income increases, you see the request for services increase. And, what's interesting is that Wenham is, I highlighted it in red there, Wenham is essentially right on the line or just barely under the line there. And so in this particular example, the correlation here, the R-squared correlation is about 65 percent there. Actually, for education, it's closer to like 75 or 80%, I think, which would make sense that the correlation is tight here because education makes up about 50 to 60% of most town budgets. So if there's a strong correlation with education, total expenditures will have a strong correlation as well.
Is that a good R-squared?
In terms of for the correlation,
Yep.
if you were, if you're looking to see if it's a good predictor, certainly like the high 70s that we have for the education is a much stronger predictor. And essentially, and Dano might be able to correct me if I'm wrong here, what you see is as the R-squared gets higher, closer to 1, things are going to get tighter to that line. And as you get further away, so we had one, actually, I was joking with Bob today where there was one that was so low that he sort of wrote absolutely useless or something because it was 0.0001 was your R-squared. But it was just for years I've been trying to find a good way to sort of compare and contrast these small towns, and this, I think, Steve and I have talked a lot about sort of other communities, why can they do things maybe sort of cheaper than Wenham, and a lot of times we come back to, Wenham is a town that does expect a certain level of services, and what Bob is sort of finding, at least in this particular chart, is that there's a correlation between median household income and that increased desire for expenditures. And this, if you look at this trend line chart, for the most part, most of the folks are pretty close to the line. Manchester by the Sea, which I knew would be an outlier because they tend to spend more, just generally speaking. West Newbury is becoming someone who is becoming a clear town that we need to look into more, because if you look at them, they are at almost the same median household income as Wenham, yet they are considerably lower on the per capita expense. So what are the things that they are doing that allow them to be at a much lower level than we are here in Wenham? Now, the biggest driver of that might just be the Hamilton-Wenham School District versus the Pentucket School District. That might be one of the biggest drivers. But across the board, from what we looked at, they managed to do things at a lower cost level than we do. So, I think it's something we're going to have to look at in more detail, and I think we may find in some instances just we demand more services in certain areas that they're not spending money that we, our residents, have demanded that we do, and in some cases it might just be, maybe they're running their finance group more efficiently or something like that. I don't know, but that's a community that sort of keeps coming back as one we need to look at in more detail, because they're just so close to us in so many ways.
So this is really good work.
Yeah, the credit goes to Bob. He did a really nice job crunching all this data.
Thank you, Bob, and I think it'll be really interesting to see what you find out from West Newbury.
It might be interesting to note that Jeff mentioned that the tight fit on education. You also get the same when you look at the libraries against the other towns. Culture, which is part library, is a less good fit. What we're doing now is moving to multiple regression, trying to understand what other factors come into play. One of the important ones is the amount of non-residential tax base in the community, because some of these towns have a fairly significant commercial base. And that seems to affect things like police. And that's one that's currently being worked on with more explanation besides MHI. It includes the amount of commercial base as well. So I think there's some interesting things here to look at that suggest things that you might do. In and of itself, what you're getting from doing this kind of analysis is things that suggest where you might want to look and actually get something you can actually do something about. But it does show, I think, that higher MHI communities spend more, either because they want more services, maybe just because they've got more money, and maybe because they're overspending on some things. So you need to think about all those three things as you go forward. But this is something that Jeff and I plan to work on it going forward in the months to come.
It's really good.
I think Daniel might have had a comment.
Just, I beat this dead horse periodically, but I do think the Gordon College factor hugely affects the calculus on this.
So actually, you'll notice it says Wenham adjusted. So that number is actually Wenham knocked from roughly 5,000 down to 4,000. So that is actually, I should thank you for bringing it up because I should have made that point. That is our worst number right there.
Outstanding.
So
Thanks. No need to beat the dead horse.
All right.
So that's all I had on operating.
Any other comments?
Move on to capital.
Yep. Yes, please.
And that's the website probably, right?
What's that? Yeah. Did you update the copy that's on?
Yeah, that's the one that's updated with the new comments and stuff. Oh, wait a minute. No, go to the wenhamma.gov website.
You want to drive, Jeff? Just pull it up.
Yeah.
So we've got a bunch of capital projects here, but I don't think, in the interest of time, I don't think we have to go through each one individually. So, I know Jeff provided a nice recap at the last meeting, and we've circulated that document with all the detailed overview.
Pictures.
So I didn't know if, I guess I'll let the boards decide, how detailed they want us to go, or if you have any specifics, questions that you have on any particular items to start it off that way, or how you want to proceed.
Gary, Deirdre, Karen?
So I think the addition of the photos, especially if we're going to use those at the warrant hearing, is going to be much better than just having some numbers up there. So
Yep.
the public comes to the warrant hearing, they can see exactly what we're talking about.
Right.
So that's
You're talking
it's
about all the extra separate slides?
yeah, they're separate slides.
Yep,
So I
I
think
agree.
that's very positive. On the individual items, I know there's always the balance between capital budget versus operating budget. It's always nice to affect the tax rate by putting stuff in the capital side. But one question I had, the tasers, is this going to be ongoing through?
It's a 5-year
5 years.
laser.
But the 6th year, we're going to start over again, right?
So, yeah, it's a 5-year lease.
No, I
So
think
what's
we
the life
still own them,
expectancy?
and they would probably have another 3 to 5 years of useful life, and then they'd be right back where we are. So we'd pay for 5. It's much like the skid steer.
All right, so
or
pay
the-
for 5, then we're going to have a break for a few
Yeah.
years, okay? Got it?
Yeah,
How
the
old are
real
ones
driving
now, do you know?
over 10.
I know they're obsolete, they don't make no parts or anything, and they've got to be 10+ years.
Yeah, so you probably got yourself a good 5 to 7 years of useful life after the last
Right.
lease payment.
So Kate and Gary, when we were talking about putting up some Miles River signs,
Yes. So that,
which I thought was short money.
and that comes out of the, Molly, with the Miles River Subcommittee from the Ipswich River
Yes,
Alliance.
yes.
Right.
So we thought that perhaps one of the first things was, I'm not sure many people in Wenham, especially newcomers, know that there's actually a river in Wenham, although it's kind of a trickle. So a couple of quick signs where they intersect the Walnut Road and Lodge Row is a possibility. And those will be same design as the ones that we'll have at Reynolds Farm and the other town places.
Yes, we got CPC funding for Reynolds Farm to do some signs and at West Wenham Park. And so I priced this out, the price of doing the same signs so we can create unity with our branding.
So it's in there.
It's in there. There are also other options where we could go cheaper with it too. So I priced it out with the same signs that we're doing at Reynolds Farm, which is right next to the Miles River, or we could go lower if you wanted.
I think we should have a single look and
Yeah.
quality for our signs.
With the branding, that's what I was hoping
Yeah.
we would do. Yep.
Okay, great.
The Historic District Commission, the guidelines, can you just elaborate on that a little bit? And I thought there was a proposal to CPC. Is it conclusive?
Yeah, they voted that down, negative.
Is it because it doesn't qualify for CPC, or that's still not clear, or it was just not approved?
Well, I guess it depends on who you ask. We believe that it qualifies in council, but I think CPC has taken a different stance on that. So ultimately, they decided to not hear the application and voted not to pursue that project. So I think the historic guidelines are something that are somewhat vague, and we've found challenging to identify exactly what the guidelines are, where the historic district committee has oversight, which is great. They have a lot of oversight, but also what's the appropriateness of their recommendations, and what type of uniformity are they applying, or is it just kind of a as is, what they're feeling like that kind of day. So this is, to really look at our, the historic district as a whole, and come up with a whole, and come up with, a uniform set of guidelines. I think it's something that is certainly needed. We get a lot of questions around the historic district, and generally we fall on, we're not sure. Send it to the historic district and see what comes out. So, and with that, and another comment that I've gotten, and I can bring it up, was, the kind of the interplay with the historic guidelines and the downtown vibrancy plan, where the majority of the downtown would be part of the vibrancy study, and also the downtown and what implications the 1A traffic signals are going to play in any sort of downtown layout. And then Kate brought to my attention that the comprehensive housing and economic development plan really has to be done first. So this was, it was in there because it's specifically stated in the master plan that we need to do one to continue on that project. However, it may make sense to delay it, or if the community wants to, fund it, the funding will be there when we're ready to get to it. But I think that both the housing and economic development study and historic guidelines probably need to get done first, or do need to get done first, because I feel like the historic guidelines and the downtown vibrancy plan may be at conflict with each other, given, the downtown vibrancy plan is going to be some development, maybe some new stuff, and the historic district is generally not in favor of that type of change.
All to be overlaid by the 1A construction.
Yes,
Right,
all
for
of
the
it, right.
stoplights.
So I've gotten that feedback. I just wanted to make that point known, if you have any discussion on that.
So the 50,000 for the historic guidelines would be to hire consultants
Yes.
to do that work? So it's not so much that there's redundancy between the two, but potentially in conflict? I mean, I guess the order of operations is not completely clear in my...
Yeah, I guess the conflict is that, you know, if you go through a vibrancy plan and come up with some ideas of what needs to be done, and then you do your historic guidelines, and they're in conflict,
Right.
then, you know, you've done a vibrancy plan that needs to be redone because now there's guidelines. But if you do the guidelines first, then they can incorporate the guidelines into the vibrancy plan, if that makes sense.
How long is it going to take to do historic guidelines in the vibrancy plan?
I mean, historic guidelines is probably a year's project by the time you gather feedback and all that. And the vibrancy plan, Kate might be able to speak a little bit more granular on it, but I'm assuming that's a year or two project by the time you get the feedback and.
Yes.
Well,
Yeah, the housing and economic development plan would be about a year, and then we'd move on from the strategies from that to go on to the vibrancy plan, which would be probably about a year as well.
so if it takes a year to do the historic guidelines, and you want to have those done first before you do your vibrancy plan, correct? That's what you're saying.
Yes.
Then I would drop 50K out of that and have the vibrancy plan for next year.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the point is to just make sure it's in front of the board, and we know that it might be
Absolutely.
another request coming
You
forward.
can leave it as a line item, just don't put any money next to it.
Well, what we could do is we could move it in the
Okay, that's a
five-year
joke,
capital.
right?
We could just move it to next year in the five-year capital plan, so
Yeah.
it's still on the list.
I mean, it is a key piece of the master plan implementation, but we did get a couple comments about, you know, the amount of funding going towards studies, and, you know, we're aware of that, and I just wanted to bring that up, that if that is a change you could make and wouldn't impact the immediacy of some of the other ones that would have to be done first anyways.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any other comments about the capital plan?
Just one quick one. I know we had seen, I think at the last FinCom meeting, there was a discussion about vehicles and the fact, especially on the fire trucks, that there are fewer and fewer manufacturers, somewhat causing a price increase. And I believe that's the same case with the police vehicles as well. And I think this is more for the public knowledge, so the people out there understand that.
So, yeah, my understanding is that you're getting fewer vehicles are, oh my God, Jeff, what's the
Police
word?
pursuit ready.
Yeah, pursuit ready. So that's what the police use, you know, that there are other vehicles, obviously, but they're not pursuit ready, and there'd be significant amount of work that would need to be done to get them ready. So you're left with a smaller selection, but, you know, I'm not sure, it may be the case, but I don't know if that specifically is driving the cost up, or if just the cost of vehicles in general is, you know, is much higher. But I think that's the, you know, the pursuit readiness is, you know, likely the reason why we're not using like a Toyota Camry versus, you know, an American equivalent or SUV. Jeff, I don't know if you have.
Yeah, I mean, and I think I forwarded it to you today. The chief sent me a little bit more of a narrative on that. Yeah, because I think, you know, it got brought up at FinCom as well. I mean, this idea that, you know, if you go to the UK or Italy or whatever, you see Peugeots and, you know, Volkswagens and things like that, and we just do not see them here. You know, and I think honestly the big three auto guys have done a good job of, you know, kind of positioning themselves as the only pursuit ready, you know, easily, you know, fixed up mod vehicles for this pursuit ready. So yeah, I think there's a little bit of, you know, price gouging there, but it's sort of, it is what it is. You know, certainly we could have discussions with the department to see if they were willing to entertain some of these other things. I mean, maybe for admin vehicles, which they do now. I mean, the chief drives a Chevy Traverse, the deputy drives a GMC Terrain, I think, was driving a Honda CRV, which was donated, and now I think the Honda CRV is actually the detective car or whatever, so, rather than driving it in a full police capacity, he drives that as he's doing detective work as it comes up. So maybe there is some ability to have, one vehicle that isn't, a full police vehicle, but I think, largely when these folks are in the vehicles and they need to respond quickly and appropriately, they want to be in the vehicle that meets all the specifications of their accreditation and things like that. But we can certainly forward the full memo to the select board. And on the fire, it definitely is a limited number of folks who make the fire vehicles, and Wenham certainly struggles with the size of the building. One of the reasons that you are looking at refurbing a 20-year-old ladder truck, there's a couple of reasons. One is that they've done a nice job of maintaining it over the years so that you can, for $150,000, do a complete refurb that will keep you from buying a $1.2 to $1.5 million truck. And the other is these newer trucks are too big to fit in old fire stations. So you are sort of forced to refurb what you have because the new one won't fit in the space that you have. Which will probably become a problem 10+ years from now.
Well, that's Ipswich.
Yeah, I mean, that was Essex.
Essex, yeah.
I mean, Essex had raised the garage door to the absolute top amount it could be raised, and they couldn't raise it anymore, so they couldn't get a new fire, they couldn't even buy a 20-year-old used fire truck because that was too big to fit in the station. So, but yeah, I think I mentioned it before, but I think the fire department's to be commended for maintaining a vehicle in a way that it can be refurbished for a relatively small amount of money relative to the cost of a new ladder truck.
Doing both the town hall and fire painting, as we're going to have a substantial contract there, is there any other painting in town that needs doing?
We did the library last time. We did the police station 2 years ago. And we could see how generally Rich didn't bring anything forward at the DPW facility that is needed.
Right.
And the iron rail, we're kind of in a holding pattern.
Right.
But no, I feel like we've been on top of that. The next thing is really the carpeting. That's kind of what we're looking at. We want to align with the library probably next year. Not to do full building. I mean, the cost is pretty staggering, but identify some sections of the library and sections of town hall that could use some carpet replacement.
All right.
And with the police, I mean, the police just had all the
Right.
carpet redone, so we're
So the schedule from here is FinCom on Wednesday, next Wednesday, you said?
We'll do it tomorrow, and then
Yeah.
maybe next Wednesday again. We are short. I think David's back tomorrow, but Finn is still out, so we'll do more work tomorrow night, I think, but probably, we won't vote on anything without Finn there. But, yeah, obviously, we're coming down the home stretch. I've started to work on the report, and I'll try to get that out to the FinCom this week, at least in draft form, so they can make edits and things like that.
So I guess maybe the board, instead of voting on this tonight, wants to wait for any additional comments, give more time, and then on the 4th, we'll just plan on finalizing it. Unless the Finance Committee has any suggestions, I don't see this, at least from a staff's perspective, our recommendation to change much, except for, maybe sans the downtown vibrancy plan, and obviously continuing to carry the town hall HVAC as a safeguard against the grant, although I keep saying it, but we remain hopeful that that's going to come through. Everything's kind of been, seems like falling our way, knock on wood, the last few weeks.
So should I update this on the web to move the downtown vibrancy to next year on the 5-year capital and remove it from the request from this year?
I think that's where the board's leaning, without any final.
What do you guys think? I think it should be moved.
Yeah, I think, because there's also questions about the timing on the Route 1A stoplight as well, right? So,
Yeah, there's a lot going on out there. Yeah, I mean, we don't know. It's been kind of crickets. Rich actually, hadn't even spoken to him about our discussion with Sally Cairns this morning. And just coincidence, he had sent, when I got back to my desk, he had already sent an email out to the state looking for, basically that we're looking for an update, that we haven't heard anything in some time. So, I mean, I would expect, they said they would probably break ground in, mid 2025. And, here we are.
And
There's been
no funding or,
no funding, no final bid sheet. So it's, I don't know.
26 maybe. Right?
Yeah, maybe.
And in that case, I think, I would not see doing a vibrancy plan before we know what the historic district rules are going to be, or until we finally know what the stoplights and the whole downtown's going to look like.
Well,
Okay.
FinCom?
Well, it just makes me wonder about the comprehensive housing and economic development plan, for that matter. They're all influenced by traffic flows and 3A and everything else. It's all predicated on, I don't know, all these variables driving each other. I'm not sure. That's it. Can we do the comprehensive housing and economic development plan without having all that figured out?
I mean, I think so. I think that 3A is, even if it was to pass as presented at town meeting in June, special town meeting, I feel like the development would be an unknown for quite some time. It was not going to happen overnight. And, we don't want to let the master plan sit on the shelf. So at some point we need to start moving forward with the action items. 3A, we could see that it could be decades before, based on the areas that they're proposing to have zoned under the that MBTA 3A, have been historically extremely challenging to develop and have been tried before. So I think that it's going to be a while. That would be my expectation. So I'm not sure waiting to see would be wise at this stage.
I guess part of me is asking that as just a thought exercise, to if that's the rationale, then do we also go ahead with the vibrancy plan based on that same rationale? Because the future's way out there, so we know we downtown. And
I think it's a very fair point, and it's a good one. I think with the vibrancy plan, the unknowns should be known in a couple of years, not, maybe possibly tens of years, I guess. But it's a fair point.
Well, that makes sense. The knowns allow you to develop a plan. They don't have to be executed yet. It could be
Right.
10 years before they're executed.
And also, the historic guidelines in the vibrancy plan are a more concentrated area, right? Whereas the economic development plan would be looking at the town as a whole. So I think there's a slight difference where the historic and the vibrancy feed into each other a bit and tie in more closely with 1A than the overall comprehensive housing and economic development plan, which is more town-wide, I would expect.
Makes sense.
To play devil's advocate, is there a way to combine the downtown vibrancy plan and the historic guidelines, together?
Yeah, I was wondering that too. I think I don't have a clear enough
Aren't they
sense.
sequential?
I
Well,
don't have
historic guidelines are driven in part by the Historic District Commission. So I think that it's kind of their project under their purview.
I don't have a clear sense of what that product
Yeah.
looks like.
Well, we can certainly, that's a fair point. We can certainly, for Joe's on vacation, and you've been
He's
working
the
closely
liaison,
with it.
yeah.
He's the lead on that project, and I honestly, I don't have a lot of feedback other than what I shared with you already tonight, but we can certainly come back with, as much information as you need, circulate it when he'll be back tomorrow. We'll I'll get with them and we'll get information out.
I think
Decision
it'd be helpful to see, is there a sample from another town, just so we have a sense of what you
Yeah.
actually produce?
No, that's good. That's a good
Is it
point.
design standards? Is it like form-based code? Like what is the end
My understanding is
product?
it's design standards, kind of applying like a uniform approach to their decision-making, so to make sure that the historic nature stays intact with what you want and not, it's not kind of the will of the board that's in the seat at the time. So to, to make sure that, the uniformity is carried on through generations of historic district committees to align with what Wenham desires the historic district to look like.
Yeah, I mean, I had a little bit of understanding from architect friends, but yeah, same thing. I think coming out of the opposite direction for anybody who's an owner or developer, super helpful to have some clear guidelines to make things more efficient for everybody.
Yeah, and we do, and to that point, we do get, as I was saying earlier, we get a lot of questions, and it's, it's almost, you hate the answer, but it's like, well, you just gotta go try, because you don't know.
Gotta go ask the committee
I mean,
on that particular
they
night.
could look at,
Yeah, and I'm all for
they could look at that shingles and be
uniformity.
like, oh, why are you even asking us? That's fine, no problem. Or it could be like the same shingles 2 years later, and it's like, well, absolutely not. Just say it would be nice to have.
I'm all for uniformity and standardization, don't get me wrong, but I think in terms of figuring out the sequencing of these plans and which comes first and which comes after, it would be helpful to know what the product is and where it gets us to sort of fit these together.
Certainly provide all of that. No
So I think what I was getting on the historical guidelines is I think you need them no matter what, whether you're in the midst of a master plan or not, that every town should have historical guidelines. So I'd argue that's maybe a little outside the sequencing question with the rest of the studies. Like the rest of the studies are part of the master plan execution, but I think the historical guidelines is just something that needs to happen no matter what. I don't know.
So let's wait for Joe to come back, because since he knows.
Yeah, we'll circulate some examples. I know they worked on a scope, to define a scope, because they were trying at the CPC, so it's all part of their application with the CPC to try to get funding. And also, I believe we failed, but we did apply for a grant to try to get this done as well. So this is kind of like our third attempt to get funding.
All right, can we move on?
That's up to you.
E, general discussion on financial-related items contained in the 2025 annual town meeting warrant, joint with finance advisors.
So that one is there just for the public's understanding. We can have any additional discussion, but Jeff's finance overview, like basically hit on all the key finance.
All right.
So any discussion that came from that, this is just kind of like one last chance to cover us for an open meeting law. Any discussion that was discussed about such things as OPEB contributions, stabilization,
Right.
free cash utilization, capital, things like that
Okay.
have all been covered.
Shall we move to F, discussion and potential vote to make recommendations on
Steve, I just wanted to, it occurred to me, I don't think we have anything on the warrant for snow and ice, and I would imagine we are going to blow through snow and ice removal budget, so we probably need an article on the town meeting warrant about how to address overspending in the snow and ice budget.
Yeah, that's a good point. You'd think we live in New England. Yeah, so if you want to bring, do we have the draft? If you want to just bring that draft up, the warrant draft. No, the warrant draft. Yes, the next one is, again, you don't have to set it now, but I figured it would be a good discussion point to start thinking. I've laid out the warrant in an order that reflects where in the warrant the select board has placed the particular article types in prior, or we don't have the same warrants every year, but generally you have a zoning article at least once the last couple of years. So I laid them out in the way that the town is used to seeing them. As far as order goes, the two wild cards really are the first two articles, which is in the draft, which is one being, as you see before you, is the new Cutler Elementary School. This is the debt exclusion article. And we're working on, or Jeff has already completed, but we're working on circulating the cost impacts to this on, on a few different ways of stating it per $100,000 of assessed value, average impact, median impact. So that will all be built in the commentary that we finished up for next meeting. And then if you scroll down, the next one is the citizens petition article for no school consolidation. I did have council take a look at this. In her opinion, that this is, it is a sense of the, she called it a sense of a meeting article. It is in no way legally binding, and it's just the opinion of the meeting at that time. So, you know, with that, I feel like whether it was legally binding or not would play into your decision-making on where you wanted it to fall in the warrant article, but with it not being legally binding in any way, you're, you know, effectively free to place it anyways, although, you know, you might want to, is placing it first going to sway the, you know, any sort of emotions or anything leading into the other article, or do you want them both at the end? The school committee, I know I haven't received any formal requests, but I've heard from Eric that the school committee requested that the school article be placed as number 1 or as early in the warrant as possible. But again, that is the select board's decision.
So
Makes sense to me.
And I think traditionally, we put the citizens petition articles at the end of the meeting, right, last few years?
Yeah.
That is common, yeah.
Yeah.
It's very frustrating.
And then, so moving through. So, like years past, it was kind of new to Wenham, but it seemed to go off really well. My first year, they moved any exemptions to the beginning before the budget as a way to, you know, just to show to the individuals that, you know, any sort of exemption that's available, the town is very proactive at getting them on the town meeting floor and opening them up to the extent possible by law. This one's no different. Then would move into the budget article, which is the operating budget. Obviously, a lot of the discussion points that were made today and our labor negotiations are probably the key driver in holding this up. So once we get those budgets, those finalized, and I am hopeful that we will have them finalized, at least there won't be probably any MOAs signed yet, but I think we would be at the point where we're comfortable filling in the dollar amounts here. So that would be good. Use of free cash. Yeah, so this is the capital improvement. We do not foresee the need for other available funds to be used here, so that would be some sort of a debt exclusion or borrowing article. We don't plan on borrowing, so that will be amended to reflect that. Keep going down. Funding a stabilization fund, again, Jeff illustrated that, kind of, you know, we're weighing the pros and cons, whether what best to do with the free cash to get us down into that 1% to 2% as a stated or draft stated net of appropriation amount. Funding in the OPEB, we don't believe this is going to be needed this year, because we'll have the stated, I think it's $100 plus $10,000, which is our annual stated contribution that the town makes. It's the prior year plus $10,000. Prior year bills, this is there every year.
Just one point on that. Typically, Wenham has put prior year bills into the next year budget article, so it's not, you can't spend it until July 1. I would like to have this be an article that uses free cash so we can pay these bills sort of immediately after town meeting, as long as we, you know, word it that way. We have some bills that are more than a year old that we need to address, and to tell those folks to wait until July 1.
Yeah.
Is
You know, actually, there was one relatively large bill to your point.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Okay.
That would require a change in wording then?
Well, that will require a change of wording from free cash from raise and appropriate to fund free cash. But the problem, I believe, that if it is a problem, but we'll weigh our, I'll bring it back to the board next time, and you can weigh the pros and cons. Is it might switch it from a simple majority to a 4/5 vote.
It
To
does.
fund it with, it does.
Yeah, it does, and I think it's 9/10 if you do it in a special.
Yeah,
But,
so,
And that would be out of
something to
current,
consider.
and that's also be out of current year free cash, right?
Exactly. it's
So
on
does that
certified free cash.
require a FinCom vote as well?
Yes, that would be voted as well. It would be voted by FinCom whether we use as part of the
Right.
budget or it's a little bit different vote.
And then the collective bargaining. So this year, town meeting has to approve the first year, the funding of the first year of any collective bargaining agreements that were signed. So this year is similar to 3 years ago. We had a similar article doing the same. Then we have the cemetery and other trust funds and the cemetery sale lots, which is where we transfer to the perpetual care. This is Jeff's request, and I know we've had some discussion, prior to when he got here with our investors investment policy, the adoption of a prudent investor language. So this is to basically open up our investment policy, or what we can invest in, to invest in assets that provide a better yield. And right now, like the way that Mass General law is written, it's very, very restrictive, and generally communities do much better adopting this language. So this one, the creation of a revolving fund, I did get off the phone very briefly with Lauren just before this meeting, and she said there is, and this is something Jeff and I will explore this week, is there's an alternative to a revolving fund for the ambulance fees, is something called an ambulance reserve fund. So I haven't even told Jeff this, but it's new information that Lauren gave me, and we'll be back for the recommendation and any potential changes at the next meeting. But just so the board's aware that the conversation is being had. Next we have this is a routine article. The next three are routine. These are water department capital expenditures and water department transfer to the capital reserve fund. They're building a capital reserve for replacement of infrastructure as it arises. And one of the additional one is they're looking to transfer a large sum of money to help with the designing of a water treatment plant. So up to $500,000 from their reserve. Road work, Chapter 90 funding. This is so that we can accept the funds through Chapter 90. This is the funds that the town receives annually to fund its road work and paving projects, or at least part of our road work and paving projects. The next one is the CPA reservation appropriations. We're still waiting on the CPC to finalize that draft, and then we'll be included for next time. The next one.
That
What's up?
CPA article is going to be ready for March?
Yes.
Right.
Yep. Yeah, they finalized the votes. They're working on. There's a number of accounts, a number of projects that have completed but have remaining balances, like small amounts in the hundreds. And one of Tom Dolly's, the CPC admin's projects, was to work with finance and get all those all cleaned up. So now it ultimately was determined that the best course of action is to clear them up through town meeting votes. So we're identifying all of them, and we'll go on one big grid. The next one, we'll know more, and I'll distribute information as it becomes available through email, so that the board isn't surprised by anything, but I don't believe the intent or the nature of any of these articles to change, but the planning board is still going through their hearing process, and they may have some different recommendations in the final wording. So as you'll see, you know, we kind of have a note here in the next, the accessory dwelling units, if you keep going, floodplain article, and stormwater management, all being brought forth by the planning board. We're waiting to get their final recommendation on those. And then the other one is the article to accept a Spring Hill subdivision. We've had some operations and maintenance items brought forward to us that we're currently exploring. It seems like there is as we kind of peel back the onion, going through the public acceptance process, there's a superseding order of conditions from the DEP that was put into effect or agreed upon back in 2017 to allow the subdevelopment to be put in. It is in the, Kay can maybe, but it's in the, is it the reservoir? Is it tributary to the reservoir?
The Longham Reservoir.
Yeah, it's a tributary to the Longham Reservoir. So the requirements to maintain the detention ponds, retention ponds, and the various catch basins and pipes are the requirements are so much greater than anything else we have in town. Things like they want a vac truck up there cleaning out the catch basins 4 times a year, semi-annual mowing of all the retention ponds. We have to hire an engineer to review all the work, I believe on a semi-annual basis, and submit an engineered report to the state on an annual basis perpetually, to saying that it's all done and up to speed. The dredging of the retention ponds, and the bringing in of special seed and stuff that has to be. So that there's a lot going on in there. We're trying to wrap our minds around, or wrap our arms around, exactly what it entails and what the cost would be, and if we have the capacity to take it on. So I'm hoping to have a memo drafted probably early next week that will be going out to the select board and the planning board of our findings, so that they're at least educated on what this entails if they were to recommend this to be adopted.
Sorry, maybe not the appropriate venue to ask, but is that something we have to do? Or do we, if we don't, if the select board chooses not to, or the town chooses not to, what happens to that
What?
road?
The road?
Yeah.
It's, it's, as it is now, it's under the responsibility of the homeowners association. So under no subdivision is the town obligated to accept the way as a public way. So that's why it's a town meeting vote.
Okay, that's what I was guessing.
Yes. And then this, finally, the election officers, this historically is always the last article, although maybe it'll be the second to last article this year if the board decides to place the citizen petition after this. But where this is, it's it lists the ballot, any additional ballot questions that will be reflected in your local election, and also the list of officers. So Diane is working on updating this. Obviously, the planning board will not be on this list this year. I did have Diane, a little side note, text me during the meeting that she looked into it, and that the special town meeting is not an option for the planning board member, because it is only affects precinct 1. It's not a townwide election.
Okay, keep going.
And that's the last. So with that, start thinking about ordering for next. Again, they're ordered in the way that the town has ordered these types of articles in the past. The only, wild card or variable in my mind is the schools where you want it to land.
Wait, did I miss it? Where's the community choice aggregation?
You didn't miss it, it's not there,
Okay.
but good point. How did that get? Well, good point. I don't know.
And the,
So next to last to last.
Oh, I missed that. No, that's a good point.
and the one up towards the top, the closing out the education and scholarship funds, have, we've got a couple of bodies in town that would be recipient to that, but have we checked with the town council? Can we actually transfer public funds to, say, a private 501c3?
Yeah, so what, I did check with council, and in case you wanted to add that to the final warrant, and what she came back to me with was that the town would have to, the way the town would have gotten those two trust funds would be to a local option, Mass General Law. So you would have to elect to essentially unadopt that local law, which is fine. But what you couldn't do is disperse the funds in the manner that were suggested. It has to follow the letter of the law. So the committee, as designed in the law, would have to be formed, and then the committee could disperse the funds.
We are the committee, right, the select board?
I thought the superintendent was on it for.
I think, maybe, yeah.
Yeah, we'll go through it. But that was the only thing, it wouldn't be the town meeting action, at least from my understanding, talking to her, again, this is right before the meeting
Right.
tonight, was that it was, you could disperse the funds. The town meeting vote would only be to
Rescind
the local option, and then the disbursement of funds would have to be done to the letter of the law. So whatever that is, if
By
it's
the
a select
committee,
board,
right?
then they can do it, or whatever, or if you have to. She was mentioning the superintendent having to be on it, but maybe I just misunderstood. And add the CCA. Yeah, good catch.
So we're doing our recommendations next meeting, right?
Yeah, we'll do all the recommendations
them.
next week meeting, yep. Because then we'll have the planning board's recommendation, we'll have the water commission's recommendation. The finance committee can either recommend at their last meeting or make their recommendations when they join us on the 4th. And, you'll also make your recommendations.
Discussion and potential vote to amend snow removal policy. It's 10 of 9. Do we really want to go through this? No?
It's up to you, Peter, as the chair.
Karen?
Is it quick?
Wait. It's flag.
I don't think it's a quick conversation.
Yeah, I don't think it is either.
Can we do it the next time?
Delaying it to the next one? Karen?
Thank you. Perfect.
Okay. Discussion and potential vote to... Oh, okay, discussion and potential vote to referral zoning article.
Yeah, so this is something that we should have done last week.
It's just an official.
This is just an official, like,
Right.
they're already looking at it, but this is just the official sending of.
So do we have a motion?
Sure. Move to refer all zoning articles in the annual town meeting warrant back to the planning board for review and redenomination.
Second?
Ready to vote? Peter says yes.
Deirdre, yes?
Gary, yes.
Right.
Okay.
Old business?
Nope, we can move to adjourn, yeah?
I think we can.
All right, move to adjourn at 8:50.
Second?
Discussion?
Nope.
I love asking that question. Peter votes yes.
Deirdre, yes?
Gary, yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Alrighty, it's a wrap.